Okay, so I'm going to show you what I was trying to do in class, creating a cumulative frequency histogram, or what we were calling an ogive. So in the stat menu here, I hope you can see my screen taps. I've entered in the data set we had in class. So remember, the first column here was the values that you can observe, and the second column was the frequencies of those values. And then in the third column, I have gone ahead and calculated the cumulative frequencies, and I want to show you a trick here. So these are just the cumulative absolute frequencies. They're numbers. We want to get some percentages. So I'm going to show you a trick for performing operations on entire lists. So if you navigate with your arrows up to where it says L4, you can type formulas using the lists into this formula bar here. So I hit enter and it brings me down here, and I can type. So what we want to do here is take the values in L3 and divide by the total number of observations, which in this case was 30. So I'm going to say second L3 divided by, if I can hit it, 30, and then hit enter, and it should populate. Okay, so this is how we can get it exactly. In class we did it approximately by hand, and notice now it should indeed add up to 1, so that's good. So let's review real quick how we got just the regular old histogram. So that's just the frequencies. You go to second stat plot, so the y equals button, and then you turn on the stat plot. So I'm going to turn on, and then you choose the kind of plot you want. We are interested in a histogram. Alright, and then it changes the arguments. So you tell it where you have the values, and then you tell it where you have the frequencies, which we had in L2. And then you just hit graph. Alright, but that's not a very good window. So your calculator will automatically fit a window if you hit zoom, and then go down to stat zoom, which I think is just 9. But you can also scroll down and hit an enter, and it will automatically fit a nice window for you, so you can see everything. And something I didn't mention in class is if you hit trace, it gives you a little cursor, and you can use this to scroll through and look at the values, the frequencies. So notice for this one it says N is 8. That's the frequency. Yeah, okay, so our calculator is doing something interesting here. When it fit the window, we'll probably talk about this next week when we get into continuous data, and your calculator is doing something a little funky with what we call the class limits. So that's where these bars start and end. So if we, to illustrate what I mean, we look at the list, the frequency of the first class is 5, and then 6, and then 5. So if you look at what the graph is doing, hit trace again. Notice the min is set to 0 and the max is set to 1.8333. Those are class limits. So what it's doing is it's totaling the values within that range of x, right? So for all observations between 0 and 1.8333. So we can actually manually change this if you go to window. And so I want to start, remember the histogram is centered around the value. So we have an observation at 0, so I probably want to go start at -1. I'm going to go up to, so I didn't use a negative there, I used a minus sign. You want to make sure you're using -1, then hit enter, and then I'm going to go up to 12 because our max value was 11, and I'm going to scale it by 1. So that's the step. Alright, so y's, I mean, we shouldn't have anything below 0, so let's just set that to 0. And then y max, I believe our highest observation was 12. Highest frequency was 12. Alright, so let's try that. Alright, so notice this looks a little better. So looks more like our dot plot in class. So we've changed the class limits. So just real quick, let's review what we did there. So I set the x minimum to 1 and the x maximum to 12. So that's the x-axis, the scale, or rather the range we're looking at on the x-axis. And then the scale is 1. So that's the steps that you're counting by. And now when we do that, if I hit trace again, so notice now the class limits are saying 0 to 1, and now our frequencies agree with what we calculated earlier. So our n is 5, then we have 6, 5, 3, 2, 1, 1, so forth and so on. Alright, so that is the histogram, the graphical representation of the frequency distribution. And we introduced a new type of frequency in class today called the cumulative frequency, and we couldn't quite get it to graph. And the reason is, what our calculators are doing is scaling our column. Oops. Hopefully you can't see that. Hold on, I might have to take this.